The scent hit her first, copper and rain and something wild underneath it, before her hands even found the wound. Wren pressed both palms against the stranger's side, feeling the hot slickness pump between her fingers with every heartbeat. She could not see his face. She had not been able to see anything for 6 years, not since the fever that took her sight and left her husband looking at her like she'd married him under false pretenses. But her hands knew wounds. Her hands knew bodies. And this body was dying on the floor of her clinic at 2 a.m, dragged in by a frantic teenager who'd pounded on her door screaming that a man had collapsed behind the gas station. "Stay with me," she said, voice steady even as her pulse hammered. "Whoever you are, you don't get to die in my clinic." A low growl answered her, more animal than man, and she felt the muscles under her palms shift in a way that made no anatomical sense. Skin rippled. Bone realigned somewhere beneath her fingers with a wet cracking sound that should have made her recoil. It didn't. She had heard the whispers in Millbrook, the ones people only said in low voices when they thought a blind woman couldn't carry gossip back to anyone who mattered. Wolves. Shifters. The powerful families who ran the north side of the county and settled their business in ways the sheriff never touched. She had never treated one before. She had certainly never held one's organs in through a gunshot wound with nothing but gauze and steady hands. "I need you to breathe slower," she said. "Slower than that. You're pushing the bleeding faster." Growl dropped into something almost like a laugh, ragged and disbelieving. "You're not scared of me." "Blind, not stupid. I know what you are. I don't know why you're bleeding out behind a gas station instead of wherever your pack keeps its doctors, and honestly, I don't care right now. Hold still." His name was Callan Ashworth, though she wouldn't learn that until an hour later, when the bleeding finally slowed enough for him to speak in full sentences instead of gritted fragments. By then she had packed the wound with everything her small clinic had, stitched what could be stitched, and sat back on her heels with blood drying tacky on her forearms, listening to his breathing even out. "The Alpha," she said. It wasn't a question. She'd heard enough now, the weight in his voice, the way even wounded he spoke like a man used to rooms going quiet when he entered them. "Was," Callan said, "until about 3 hours ago, when my own beta decided the throne looked better on him. He shot me with a silver round and left me for the crows. I only made it this far because I shifted enough to slow the bleeding, and even that barely worked." Wren's hands stilled on the fresh bandage. "You're telling me there's a man out there right now who thinks he killed you. I'm telling you there's a man out there who's about to become very unhappy when he finds out he didn't." She should have been afraid. A blind woman with a bleeding, deposed alpha wolf in her clinic, his enemies presumably still hunting, her own life about to be dragged into something enormous and dangerous. Instead, what she felt, sitting there with his blood under her fingernails, was something she hadn't felt in 6 years, useful. Necessary, seen in whatever way a man could see a woman who couldn't see him back. "You should go somewhere safer than this," she said. "I can call someone, there has to be someone." "There isn't, not tonight." A pause, and she heard him shift, testing the stitches, hissing at the pull. "Why did you help me? You didn't know what I was when you opened that door." "Open the door to whoever's bleeding. That's the job." She stood, wiping her hands on a towel that was already ruined. "My husband would tell you I have terrible judgment about who to let into my life, so maybe don't take it as a compliment." "Husband," Callan repeated, and something in the way he said the word made her want to explain herself, which irritated her because she owed a stranger nothing. "Marcus," she said anyway. "We've been married 8 years, married before the accident. He stayed after, if that's what you're wondering, technically. Technically. Comes home late. He showers before he touches me, which he didn't used to do. He thinks I can't smell the perfume because I can't see the lipstick on his collar." She hadn't meant to say any of that out loud. She blamed the adrenaline, the blood, the strange intimacy of having just held a man's life together with her own 2 hands. "I don't know why I told you that. Because most people around me are too scared to tell me the truth," Callan said quietly. "You didn't have room left to be careful." "I'd rather have that than careful most days." She didn't answer. She busied herself instead, cleaning instruments she didn't need to clean, because the silence after his words felt too large for the small room. He stayed 3 days, hidden in the back room above her clinic, healing at a rate that would have been impossible for any human, still slower than it should have been for a wolf, which told her the silver had done real damage. She brought him food. She listened to him breathe at night through the thin wall and told herself it was only concern for a patient. On the second night, he told her about his pack, about the beta named Griff Sallow who'd been circling the alpha seat for 2 years, patient as rot. On the third night, he asked her to describe what she remembered of colors, since she did sight once, and she found herself telling him about the exact gold of morning light on wheat fields, a memory she hadn't let herself touch in years because it hurt too much to hold. "You don't talk like a woman who's given up," he said. "Talk like a woman who doesn't have a choice about that." But she was smiling when she said it, and she heard him notice. On the fourth morning, Marcus came home from wherever he'd been and found blood in the clinic sink that Wren hadn't managed to fully scrub away. "Whose blood is this?" His voice had an edge she recognized, the specific sharpness of a guilty man looking for someone else to be guilty first. "A patient's," she said, which was true. "You had a patient here overnight, in our house. It's a clinic, Marcus. That's what clinics are for." She kept her tone even, though her heart had started to race, because she could hear Callan's careful stillness upstairs, could hear him listening to every word. "Funny," Marcus said, "because Denise at the diner said she saw a strange truck parked behind the building 3 nights running. Big, expensive, out of place. You want to tell me about that patient?" "I want to tell you that you smelled like Denise's perfume the last 4 Tuesdays, and I never asked you a single question about it." The words came out before she could stop them, 6 years of swallowed suspicion finally cracking loose. "So no. I don't think I owe you an explanation about who I treat in my own clinic." Silence that followed was different from any silence she'd known in this marriage. Marcus didn't deny it. That was the part that told her everything, not the affair itself, which some numb, resigned part of her had already accepted months ago, but the fact that he didn't even bother lying anymore. He didn't think she was worth the effort of a lie. "I want a divorce," he said finally, flat, like he was reading a grocery list. "I've wanted one for a while, I just didn't know how to say it to a blind woman without feeling like the villain." "You are the villain, Marcus. The blindness has nothing to do with it." He left that afternoon. He didn't take much: some clothes, his truck keys, the watch his father had given him. He didn't say goodbye to her directly. He said it to the air of the house, the way you'd say goodbye to a room you were done needing. Wren stood in the kitchen for a long time after the door closed, waiting to feel devastated. What she felt instead was lighter, terrifyingly light, like a rope she hadn't known was around her ribs had finally been cut. Upstairs, she heard Callan moving, slow and careful on heeling legs, coming down to find her. "You heard all that," she said. "I heard all of it." His voice was closer now than she expected, just at the bottom of the stairs. "I'm sorry. I've been divorced from him in every way that matters for 2 years. Today just made it official." She turned toward his voice, chin lifted. "What happens now? You're healed enough to leave. Your pack thinks you're dead. Do you go take your throne back?" "I go take my throne back," he agreed. "And I'm not leaving you here to explain a dead marriage and a missing patient to a town full of people who gossip for sport. That's not your problem to solve. Mine the night you decided a bleeding stranger was worth the risk." She heard him take a step closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him, alpha warmth that had nothing to do with fever. "Come with me, not because you owe me anything, because Griff Sallow doesn't know you exist yet, and I intend to keep it that way, and the only way I can promise that is if you're standing where I can see you." "Can't see anything," she said, half a laugh, half something rower. "I didn't say it right." His voice dropped, low and certain in a way that made her breath catch. "Where I can protect you. I've had people protect me my whole life because of what I am. I've never once had someone patch me up because of who I am. I'm not in a hurry to lose that." Wren stood very still, 6 years of darkness around her, and for the first time in a long time, felt something that resembled a future opening up instead of closing down. She didn't answer him yet, but she didn't say no. Outside, unheard by either of them, an engine idled at the end of the street, patient as wrought, waiting to see who walked out of that house and when. The truck at the end of the street belonged to a man named Denny Aucaffer, though Wren wouldn't learn that name for another 2 days. She only knew, as she and Callan finally stepped out of the house that evening with a single packed bag between them, that the air felt wrong. Wolves could sense things humans couldn't, and apparently 6 years of blindness had sharpened whatever instincts she had left, because the hair on her arms rose before Callan even tensed beside her. "Someone's watching," she said quietly. "I know." Callan's hand found the small of her back, guiding her toward a different vehicle than the one that had been idling, a plain sedan he'd arranged through a contact he trusted. "Griff has eyes everywhere now. He'll have people watching every hospital, every clinic, every place a wounded wolf might crawl to die. I was careless coming here." "You weren't careless. You were dying. There's a difference." They didn't speak again until they were 20 miles outside Millbrook, the sedan's tires humming against wet asphalt, rain starting to needle the windshield. Wren kept her hands folded in her lap, cataloging the sounds of a world she navigated by ear now, the wipers, the engine, the occasional pass of headlights that swept light across her closed eyelids without meaning anything to her anymore. "Tell me about her," Callan said eventually. "Hurt you before Marcus did." "You don't build walls that fast for one bad marriage," Wren almost laughed. "You're perceptive for a man who was bleeding out on my floor 4 days ago. I have a lot of time to think when I'm healing." A pause. "You don't have to tell me." But she found she wanted to, which surprised her more than the question had. "My mother left when I was 12. My father raised me to believe needing people was a weakness, so when I lost my sight at 26, I tried to prove him right. Tried to do everything myself. Marcus was the one who insisted on staying at first. I thought that meant something. I didn't realize staying and loving aren't always the same verb." "They're not," Callan agreed. "I've watched my own father stay in a marriage that curdled into something ugly because leaving would have looked weak to the pack. Wolves aren't immune to that particular poison. We just dress it up in loyalty instead of duty." "That what happened with your beta, Griff?" "Loyalty that curdled?" Callan was quiet long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. "Griff and I grew up together, raised like brothers, trained together, bled for each other more than once. 2 years ago his mate died in a territory dispute I made the call on. I chose to protect a human settlement on our border instead of pulling every wolf back to defend pack land directly, and while I was making that choice, the dispute turned violent somewhere I hadn't predicted, and Priya was caught in it. That's not the same as him shooting you. But grief doesn't always stay grief. Sometimes it turns into something that needs somewhere to go, and I was the easiest target because I was the one who made the call." His voice had gone rough at the edges. "I don't think he's wrong to hate me. I think he's wrong about what to do with it." Wren turned her face toward him, wishing, not for the first time since the fever, that she could see an expression instead of only hearing the shape of a voice. "That's a strange kind of mercy, forgiving a man for shooting you." "I didn't say I forgave him. I said I understood him. Those are different verbs, too." They arrived at Packland past midnight, a sprawling property Wren could tell was enormous by the way sound changed around her: open air, distant trees, a large structure ahead that swallowed echo differently than a house did. She heard voices immediately, a commotion of disbelief and relief tangled together as word spread that the Alpha was alive. "He's alive," someone said, close enough that Wren flinched. "Sallow told the pack he died in a rival skirmish. He's had the seat for 4 days." "Me to him," Callan said, and the authority in his voice had sharpened into something that made even Wren straighten instinctively. "Quietly. I want to see his face before he knows I'm coming." A woman's voice cut through the group, calm and clipped. "Callan, you look like death warmed over twice." "Nice to see you too, Sable." There was real warmth under the words. "This is Wren. She's the reason I'm not actually dead. I need her kept safe and out of pack politics until I say otherwise." Wren would learn her full name was Sable Doyle, the pack's head of security, didn't ask questions, only said, "Understood," in a tone that suggested she'd follow that order without hesitation, and Wren felt something loosen in her chest at being placed, however briefly, under someone's explicit protection instead of having to fight for every inch of safety herself. What happened over the next several hours came to her second hand, through Sable's low-voiced narration as they waited in a room somewhere in the compound. Callan had confronted Griff in front of the assembled pack council, silver wound still visible, healing but ugly. Griff had not denied the shooting. He'd stood in front of everyone and said the words plainly, that he had made his choice and would make it again, that Callan's leadership had cost the pack too much and it was time for new blood. "There's going to be a challenge," Sable told Wren, voice tight. "Pack law. Griff's invoking his right to formally contest the Alpha seat instead of running from it. Combat, not vote. Winner takes the pack. When? 3 days. Enough time for Callan's wounds to heal properly, which Griff knows, which tells you he's confident he can still win even with Callan at full strength." Sable exhaled. "Griff's always been strong, stronger than people give him credit for. This isn't going to be a formality." Wren sat with that information for a long moment, feeling the particular helplessness of not being able to see the danger closing in, only hear about it in reports. "Is there anything I can do?" "Keep him steady," Sable said, surprising her. "He's spent 4 days convincing everyone he's fine. He hasn't had a single hour to actually process almost dying. You patched him up. Maybe you're the only one who gets to see him when he's not fine. That night, Callan found her on a small balcony off the guest room she'd been given, the November air cold enough to bite. She heard him before he spoke, the particular weight of his footsteps that she'd already, unsettlingly, begun to memorize. "You should be resting," she said. "So should you." He came to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him again, that alpha heat that seemed to radiate independent of weather. "Sable told you about the challenge." "Did." "I'm going to win it," Callan said, and there was no arrogance in it, only flat certainty, the voice of a man stating a fact rather than hopping for one. "But I wanted you to hear it from me instead of pack gossip. If I don't win, this whole place becomes very dangerous for you very fast. Griff doesn't take prisoners he doesn't trust, and he has no reason to trust a human who patched up his rival. You trying to scare me into leaving? Trying to be honest with you. There's a difference between those two, apparently, since you keep teaching me new definitions for old words." She heard the ghost of a smile in his voice. Wren considered the wind on her face, the distant sound of pack members still awake and murmuring somewhere below, the strange gravity of a life that had upended itself completely in less than a week. 6 years ago, she would have called this reckless. 6 years ago, she'd had sight and a husband who loved her, and none of it had kept her safe from either loss. "I'm not leaving," she said. "I didn't stitch you back together just to watch you die in a fight 3 days from now. Consider me invested." "That's a dangerous thing to be around here. I'm aware." She turned her face toward him. "Tell me something. When you said you wanted me where you could protect me, did you mean it as a debt? Because I didn't help you expecting payment." There was a long pause, long enough that she wondered if she'd overstepped. Then his hand found hers on the balcony railing, warm and careful, like he was asking permission with the touch itself. "I meant it because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the moment you told me to hold still instead of screaming," he said. "That's not a debt, Wren. That's something I don't have a clean word for yet." She didn't pull her hand away. The wind moved around them, cold and clean, and for the first time since the fever took her sight, Wren felt like she wasn't navigating a life reduced by loss, but one expanding into something she couldn't yet map. The next morning, everything changed again. Sable came to her room before sunrise, voice low and urgent in a way that made Wren's stomach drop before a word was spoken. "Griff knows about you," Sable said. "Not just that you exist. He knows who you were married to. And Wren Marcus didn't just leave town after your divorce. He went straight to Griff Sallow. Sold him everything he knew about you, your clinic, your routine, even things about Callan's visits he never should have noticed. Marcus has been feeding Griff information since before Callan was even shot." Wren felt the floor tilt beneath her, though she hadn't moved at all. "That's not possible. Marcus doesn't know anything about wolves. He's human." "He's human," Sable agreed grimly. "But apparently he's been human and employed, working small jobs for Griff's side of the pack politics for over a year. That's not a coincidence, Wren. That's a setup. Someone wanted Callan wounded and desperate enough to end up exactly where you'd find him." Room went very quiet, the kind of silence that came right before something broke. "Telling me," Wren said slowly, "that the night I saved his life wasn't chance at all." Didn't answer right away, and in that silence, Wren understood the answer had already been given. For a long moment, Wren couldn't make her mouth work. The rain-soaked night in her clinic, the frantic teenager pounding on her door, the blood under her fingernails, all of it rearranged itself in her mind into something colder and more deliberate than she'd let herself consider. "Say it plainly," she told Sable. "Don't soften it for me. I've had enough people in my life decide what version of the truth I could handle." Sable's voice stayed level, but there was real reluctance in it. Griff needed Callan somewhere he couldn't be immediately found and finished off by pack loyalists who'd have rallied to protect him. He needed him wounded, isolated, and slow to heal. A silver round does that on its own, but silver alone doesn't guarantee a body ends up in a specific gas station, lot behind a specific clinic, run by a specific blind woman whose husband happened to be on Griff's payroll. "You're saying Marcus steered him there?" "I'm saying it's too precise to be luck. Marcus knew you worked late some nights. Knew the back road behind the station wasn't watched by cameras. Knew you'd never turn away a bleeding stranger, because that's who you are, and your own husband knew that about you well enough to use it." Wren sat down hard on the edge of the bed, the strength going out of her legs all at once. 6 years of navigating a dark world by trust and instinct, and the one person she'd built her whole married life around had apparently spent the last stretch of it selling pieces of her to a man plotting a coup. "Why," she said, voice thinner than she wanted it to be, "why would Marcus involve himself in something like this at all? He's not Pac. He's not even supernatural. What does a man like Griff want with a human's help?" "Money, probably, at first," Sable said. "Griff's side of this fight has been recruiting outside resources for months, humans who don't ask too many questions about what they're paid to notice or ignore. But I don't think it stayed simple. I think somewhere along the way, Marcus realized what kind of leverage a devoted, blind wife married into nothing supernatural could become once the right wolf started circling." The word leverage sat in Wren's chest like a stone. She thought of every night Marcus came home late. Every time she told herself the perfume on his collar was the whole betrayal, the entire wound, when the entire time there might have been a second, colder betrayal running underneath it, not infidelity alone, but calculation. "Does Callan know?" she asked. "He will within the hour. I wanted you to hear it from me first, because you deserve to hear it from someone who isn't about to also be furious on your behalf in front of you." Sable's hand touched her shoulder, brief and steadying. "For what it's worth, none of this changes what you did that night. You didn't know. Your instincts were good even if the setup around them wasn't." Wren nodded, though the reassurance barely touched the cold spreading through her. Callan came to her 20 minutes later, and she didn't need sight to know the fury radiating off him, a heat sharper than the alpha warmth she'd grown used to, something closer to a held storm. "I should have smelled it," he said, low and furious, though not at her. "I should have known a wound that specific, a location that convenient wasn't chance. I was too far gone from blood loss to think straight, and I let it cost you." "It hasn't cost me anything yet," Wren said, though even as she said it she wondered if that was true. "Marcus is gone. He left because he wanted to leave. Whatever ugly reasons were underneath that, the leaving itself was real." "He's not gone, Wren. He's with Griff. Right now, tonight, probably feeding him everything he can remember about how close you and I have become, which Griff will use exactly as ruthlessly as he used everything else." Callan's jaw was tight. "I need you to consider leaving Pac land until the challenge is settled. Somewhere Sable can guard properly, away from the compound, away from anyone who might get ideas about using you as leverage against me in the fight itself." "No." The word came out immediate, hard, surprising even her. "I'm not spending the next 2 days hiding in some safe house while you fight for your life. I didn't survive 6 years of losing everything just to become the fragile thing everyone protects by locking away. This isn't about fragility. This is about strategy." "Then let me be part of the strategy instead of the thing you're strategizing around." She stood, chin lifted toward the sound of his voice. "You said it yourself. Griff is patient, methodical, willing to use anyone useful to him. That includes information. I've spent 6 years learning how to read people through sound alone, tone, breath, hesitation, the things sighted people miss because they're too busy trusting their eyes. If Marcus is talking to Griff, and if either of them comes anywhere near this compound before the challenge, I might be the only one who can hear the lie in what they say before it costs someone their life." Callan was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice had softened, though the fury hadn't left it entirely. "You're impossible." "I've been told." I meant it as something closer to admiration than complaint. Despite everything, Wren felt the corner of her mouth lift. "I know, I could hear that too." 2 days before the challenge passed in tense preparation. Wren spent hours with Sable, learning the compound's layout by sound and touch, memorizing the cadence of different pack members' footsteps, their voices, who moved with confidence and who moved like they were hiding something. Callan trained during the day, healing wounds pushed hard against the limits of what his body could bear, and came to her each night quieter, more contained, like a man conserving something precious for a fight he couldn't afford to lose. On the second night, she found him standing alone near the training grounds, his breathing still ragged from exertion. "Tell me the truth about something," she said, coming to stand beside him. "Can you actually beat him, or is this pack bravado talking?" Callan didn't answer immediately. "Griff is strong, maybe stronger than me on a night where nothing else is wrong. But he's fighting for grief and vengeance dressed up as principal, and I'm fighting for a pack I actually love, and for—" He stopped himself. "For what?" Wren asked, though something in her chest already guessed. "For a chance to find out what this could become," he said quietly, gesturing at the space between them, though she couldn't see the gesture, only felt the weight of the words land. "That matters more than I expected it to. It's given me something to fight for that isn't just duty." Wren reached out until she found his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Then fight for that. Not for Griff's grief, not for the pack's expectations. For the thing you just described." He turned toward her, and for a moment neither of them spoke, the space between them charged with everything neither had said outright. Then he leaned down, and she met him halfway, and the kiss that followed was slow and certain, nothing like the frantic urgency of the night she'd first touched his bleeding side, but something that felt like an answer to a question she hadn't known she was still asking. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he murmured against her forehead afterward, "I need you to know that finding you was the only good thing to come out of the worst night of my life." "Don't talk like a man saying goodbye," she said, voice fiercer than she intended. "Talk like a man planning to come back to me." "Then I'll come back to you," he said. "That's a promise, not a hope." The morning of the challenge arrived cold and clear. The kind of sharp autumn air that carried sound further than usual, every voice and rustle of movement reaching Wren with unusual clarity as Sable guided her to a position near the front of the gathered pack. "Describe it to me," Wren said quietly as the crowd's murmur swelled around them. "I need to know what's happening, not just hear it." "They're circling," Sable said, voice tight with focus. "Griff's bigger in wolf form than I remembered, or maybe he's just been feeding that anger for 2 years and it's grown him somehow. Callan's faster, always has been. He's letting Griff commit first, waiting for an opening." The sounds of the fight itself were almost unbearable to listen to without sight to anchor them. Snarls, the impact of bodies colliding, gasps from the crowd rising and falling like a tide. Wren gripped Sable's arm hard enough to bruise, cataloging every sound for meaning, terror building in her chest with every pause that stretched too long. "He's hurt," Sable said suddenly, voice dropping. Griff caught his shoulder, the old wound side, right where the silver hit before. A collective gasp went up from the crowd, sharp and horrified, and Wren felt her whole body go cold. "Sable, tell me what's happening, now." "Griff's got him pinned," Sable said, and for the first time since Wren had met her, the other woman's voice shook. "He's not going for a killing blow, he's talking. I can't hear what he's saying from here, but Callan stopped struggling and Wren—" Sable's grip on her tightened. "Marcus just walked out from the crowd. He's standing right next to Griff. He's holding something. It looks like a gun." Wren's heart slammed against her ribs. A gun? Why would Griff need a gun in a fair challenge? "Because it's not a fair challenge," Sable breathed, horror dawning in her voice. "It never was. This whole thing, the wound, the setup, even letting the challenge go to formal combat instead of just killing Callan outright, Griff wanted witnesses. He wanted the pack to watch him win clean, and if he couldn't win clean, he arranged a backup that wouldn't look like cheating to anyone who didn't already know. "Silver bullets don't discriminate between fair and unfair," Wren said, already moving, pulling free of Sable's grip despite the other woman's protest. "Point me toward them, now." "Wren, you can't see, you don't know where." "I know where his voice is. I've been listening to Marcus lie to me for 6 years. I'll know exactly where he's standing." She was already walking, fast, cane forgotten somewhere behind her, guided by nothing but sound and fury and a certainty she couldn't explain even to herself. "Tell the pack to move. Tell them what you saw. I'm not losing him to a bullet after everything." Behind her, she heard Sable's voice rise, shouting warnings to the crowd, chaos beginning to ripple outward. Ahead of her, she heard Marcus's breathing, quick and shallow, the particular rhythm of a man about to do something he knew was unforgivable. She heard the click of a safety releasing, and she ran straight toward the sound, arms outstretched, screaming Callan's name into a crowd that had gone suddenly, terribly silent. Time did something strange in that final second, stretching thin and sharp, every sound amplified beyond bearing. Wren felt the crowd part around her without needing to see it, bodies flinching back from her sprint, gasps rising like a wave she was outrunning. "Marcus, don't," she screamed, and for one terrible heartbeat she thought her voice alone might stop him, some last thread of whatever they'd once had pulling tight enough to matter. It didn't. The gunshot cracked across the training ground, and the world seemed to hold its breath around the sound. Wren collided with a body a half-second later, not Marcus's, someone who had thrown themselves into her path, and they went down together hard onto packed earth, the impact driving the air from her lungs. For one horrifying moment she thought she'd been shot, that this was what dying felt like, sharp and confusing and too fast to properly understand. Then she heard Callan's voice, close to her ear, rough with pain but alive. I've got you, I'm here. You're supposed to be fighting Griff," she gasped, hands scrambling over him in the dark of her blindness, searching for a wound the way she had that first night, except this time her fingers found only a graze along his upper arm, hot but shallow. "You left the fight to catch me. I heard you running toward a gun." There was no version of that fight that mattered more than that. His arms tightened around her even as chaos erupted on every side, shouts and snarls and the heavy thud of bodies moving fast. "Stay down! Sable's got Marcus." She hadn't heard Sable move, but she heard the results of it now, a man's cry of pain and outrage, a scuffle, the unmistakable sound of a gun clattering across stone. Somewhere beyond that, another fight had reignited, snarls sharper and more savage than before, and Wren realized with a jolt that Griff hadn't stopped just because the crowd had turned to chaos. "Griff's still coming," she said, gripping Callan's good arm. "He'll use this, the confusion. He'll finish it while everyone's looking at Marcus instead of him." Callan went very still for half a second, the stillness of a predator recalculating, and then he was moving, pulling her up with him, positioning her behind his body even as he turned to face the sound of approaching footsteps, heavy and fast and furious. "Sable," he barked. "Get her clear." "Not leaving," Wren said. "Not fighting a 200-pound wolf with your bare hands either," Sable snapped, hands closing around Wren's shoulders, hauling her backward despite her resistance. "Let him finish this. You've done enough." Wren fought the pull for exactly 1 second before some cold, clear part of her mind agreed. She wasn't helpless. She'd never been helpless. But there was a difference between refusing to be sidelined and refusing to let the man she loved do the one thing he was built to do. She let Sable move her back, listening with every ounce of focus she had left as the final collision happened, Callan's growl meeting Griff's in a crash of bodies that shook the ground beneath her feet. The fight that followed was shorter than the first one had been, brutal and decisive in a way that told her something had shifted. Some final restraint in Callan, finally released now that the stakes had become impossibly clear. It ended with a sound she would remember for the rest of her life, a single sharp yelp followed by absolute silence, the entire crowd holding its breath as one. "It's done," Sable breathed beside her, voice shaking with relief. "Griff's down, he's alive but he's down. Callan's standing over him, it's done, Wren." Wren felt her knees nearly give out, relief crashing through her so hard it left her lightheaded. "Take me to him." Didn't argue this time. She guided Wren forward across the churned earth, through a crowd that had gone from chaos to a strange, reverent hush, until Wren felt the particular heat of Callan directly in front of her, breathing hard, blood scenting the air around him. "Hey," he said, voice rough but achingly gentle. "Told you I'd come back to you. You cut it closer than I would have liked." She reached up, finding his face with both hands, tracing the line of a fresh cut along his cheekbone, the reality of him solid and warm and alive under her palms. "Don't do that to me again. I make no promises about what Griff does or doesn't do in the future, but I promise to try." He turned his head slightly, pressing a kiss to her palm before catching her hands in his. "It's over. The pack is mine again, clean in front of witnesses. Nobody can dispute this." Around them, the crowd had begun to shift, murmurs of relief and disbelief rippling outward, and Wren allowed herself for just a moment to simply breathe in the fact of him being alive, whole, hers in whatever strange new way that word had come to mean over the last week. It didn't last. Callan. Sable's voice cut through the relief, sharp and urgent again, and Wren felt the mood shatter instantly. "It's Marcus. What about him?" "He's gone." Wren's stomach dropped. "Gone, Sable, you had him." "I had him," Sable said, frustration and something close to fear threading through her words, until 3 of Griff's remaining loyalists created a diversion during the fight. By the time I looked back, he'd slipped free in the chaos, and he took something with him. What? Callan asked, already tensing again, the brief piece of victory draining out of his voice. Sable hesitated, and that hesitation alone told Wren the answer was going to be bad before a single word was spoken. Silver, Sable said finally. Griff's stockpile, the rounds he'd been having specially made for exactly this kind of contingency. Marcus knew where they were kept because he'd been the one helping move them onto pack land over the past few months. There's enough silver missing to kill every wolf in this compound twice over, and he's out there right now with all of it and nothing left to lose. Silence that followed felt like the ground opening beneath Wren's feet all over again. He wouldn't, she said, though even as the words left her mouth she knew how hollow they sounded. Marcus, who had lied to her for years, who had sold information about her to a man plotting murder, who had stood beside Griff holding a gun aimed at the man she loved. There was very little left in that list of betrayals that she could still call unthinkable for him. He's a man who just watched his patron lose everything and his own future collapse in front of an entire pack, Callan said grimly. Desperate men do things reasonable men wouldn't. We need to find him before he decides revenge is worth whatever's left of his life. There's something else, Sable added, quieter now, glancing between them in a way Wren could hear even without seeing it, some hesitation in her breathing that made Wren's skin prickle with dread. One of the loyalists we caught said something before Griff went down, said Marcus wasn't planning to come after Callan at all. Then who? Wren asked, though some cold certainty had already begun forming in her chest before Sable finished the sentence. He said Marcus kept saying it wasn't fair, Sable said slowly. That Wren got to walk away with everything, the new pack, the new life, the alpha, while he got nothing. He said Marcus wasn't planning to shoot a wolf at all. The words hung in the cold morning air, and Wren felt Callan's entire body go rigid beside her, understanding arriving in both of them at exactly the same moment. He's coming for me, Wren said, and her voice, to her own surprise, didn't shake. Callan's hand found hers, gripping tight enough to ground them both. Not while I'm breathing. You're wounded. Half the pack just watched you nearly die twice in 1 week. She turned toward him, chin lifted, that same stubborn certainty rising in her chest that had carried her through 6 years of darkness and a lifetime of being underestimated. I'm not hiding from him. I spent 6 years letting that man make me smaller, make me doubt what I knew about my own life. I'm done being the thing people fight over instead of the person who decides how this ends. No, his footsteps, Callan. I know the sound of his breathing when he's afraid versus when he's angry. If he's out there somewhere on this compound right now, working himself up to something unforgivable, I might be the only one who can hear him coming before he strikes. She squeezed his hand once hard. Let me help end this, properly, together. Callan exhaled slowly, the sound of a man weighing love against every protective instinct in his body and finding neither answer satisfying. Together, he agreed finally, low and rough. But you stay close enough that I can reach you the second something changes. That's not negotiable. Deal. They moved out from the crowd together, flanked by Sable and 2 of the pack's fastest trackers, spreading into the tree line at the edge of the compound where the scent trail, faint but unmistakable, wound off into the dense November woods. The pack fell into formation around them with practiced efficiency, but Wren noticed something in the air that made the hair on her arms rise, something beyond simple tension. Sable, she said quietly. Something's wrong. The birds stopped. Went still, scanning the tree line with sharpened senses. She's right. Everyone stop. Silence that followed was absolute, unnatural, the kind of quiet that came right before something terrible. Wren felt Callan's hand tighten around hers, felt him turn slowly, scenting the air, and heard the low, warning growl building in his chest a half-second before he spoke. That's not Marcus's scent, he said, voice dropping to barely a whisper. There's more than one person out there, and Wren, his grip on her hand turned almost painful. One of them smells like you. Wren's blood went cold. That's not possible. I don't have any family left. Nobody who? A twig snapped somewhere close, deliberately loud, the sound of someone who wanted to be heard. Hello, Wren. A woman's voice called from the tree line, calm and eerily familiar, threading through the silent woods like something out of a memory Wren couldn't quite place, though every instinct in her body screamed that she should know that voice, that she had heard it before, long ago, before the fever, before the darkness took everything from her. Who's there? Wren demanded, though her own voice had begun to shake for the first time all day. You don't recognize me, the voice said, closer now, almost amused, almost sad. I suppose 6 years and a lot of distance will do that. But I recognized you the second Marcus described you to my associates. Same stubborn chin, same voice that never learned when to stay quiet. Wren's knees nearly buckled as recognition, impossible and undeniable, crashed through her. Mom! The woods went silent again, save for the sound of footsteps emerging from the tree line, slow and deliberate, and somewhere behind that voice, Marcus's ragged breathing, and beyond that, the click of more than one weapon being readied in the dark.